What if changing your life did not require extreme effort? What if success was not about working harder, but about working consistently? Most people believe that real change requires big action. They believe transformation comes from dramatic decisions, from sudden motivation, from massive discipline. But what if this belief is actually the reason why most people never change? 30 days ago, I decided to test something very simple, a concept so small that at first, it almost felt meaningless. I decided to improve my life by just 1% every day, not 10%, not 50%, not a complete life transformation overnight. Just 1% at first. This idea sounded almost too simple, too slow, too insignificant. My mind kept telling me that small effort produces small results. But another part of me wondered, what if small improvement repeated every day becomes powerful? What if consistency is more important than intensity? What if real change is invisible in the beginning? So I committed to an experiment. For 30 days, I would focus only on tiny improvements, no unrealistic goals, no extreme routines, no pressure to become perfect, just small progress every day. The goal was not to impress anyone. The goal was not to show fast results. The goal was to test whether gradual improvement can actually transform mindset, productivity, and confidence. Because many people start strong, but very few people stay consistent. And consistency is where real change happens. At the beginning, I did not expect dramatic results. I did not expect immediate success. But what happened? During these 30 days, changed the way I see progress forever. Because sometimes the smallest decision creates the biggest difference. And sometimes progress is happening even when you cannot see it yet. This experiment started as a simple curiosity, but it became something much deeper, something psychological, something transformational. Because improving 1% every day is not just about habits. It is about proving to yourself that change is possible, even when progress feels slow, even when motivation disappears, even when results are not immediately visible. The question is not whether 1% improvement is enough. The question is what happens when small progress becomes part of who you are. Because when improvement becomes daily behavior, change becomes unavoidable. And that is exactly what I wanted to test. Can small daily improvement actually change the direction of life? Or is it just another motivational idea that sounds good, but does not work for the next 30 days? I would find out. And what I discovered surprised me. Like most people, I always wanted to improve my life. I had goals. I had plans. I had ideas about the person I wanted to become. I imagined a more productive version of myself, a more disciplined version, a more focused version, someone who wakes up early, someone who uses time wisely, someone who keeps promises to themselves. But imagination is easy, execution is difficult. I remember many moments when I felt highly motivated, moments when I felt ready to change everything I would. Promise myself that from tomorrow, everything will be different. Tomorrow, I will wake up earlier. Tomorrow, I will become more productive. Tomorrow, I will start improving my habits. Tomorrow felt powerful, but tomorrow often became next week, and next week slowly became next month. Sometimes motivation lasted for 2 days, sometimes for 1 week, but eventually something always happened. Energy dropped, focus disappeared. Discipline became difficult, and slowly I returned to old patterns, old habits, feel comfortable, even when they are not helpful, because the human brain prefers familiarity. Even if familiarity prevents growth, I realized that I was not alone in this experience. Many people want change, but very few people maintain change. The problem is not lack of desire. The problem is inconsistency. We often try to change too many things at the same time. We try to build perfect routines immediately. We try to become highly productive overnight. We try to transform our identity instantly. But rapid transformation creates pressure. Pressure creates resistance. Resistance creates avoidance. And avoidance creates guilt. This cycle repeats again and again. High motivation, unrealistic expectations, temporary action, loss of consistency, disappointment. Then the cycle starts. Again, each time motivation feels weaker, each time confidence feels lower, because repeated failure slowly affects self-belief. You start questioning yourself. Maybe I am not disciplined. Maybe I am not focused. Maybe I am not capable of change, but the truth is often different. The problem is not personality. The problem is strategy. When goals feel too big, the brain feels overwhelmed. When the brain feels overwhelmed, it looks for comfort. Comfort leads back to familiar habits, and familiar habits keep life the same. I noticed something important. Whenever I tried extreme change, I felt excited at the beginning, but exhausted after a short time. Extreme routines require extreme energy, and extreme energy is difficult to maintain. Life already contains responsibilities. Work, family, stress, unexpected situations. When life becomes busy, discipline becomes unreliable, and unrealistic plans collapse. I began to understand that progress must feel manageable. Improvement must feel sustainable, because sustainable action creates long-term change. If improvement feels too difficult, the brain rejects it. But if improvement feels simple, the brain accepts it. That realization changed my perspective. Instead of asking how to completely transform life quickly, I started asking how to make improvement easier, how to reduce resistance, how to make progress feel natural, because the easier the action, the more likely it becomes consistent. And consistency is more powerful than intensity. Many people wait for perfect motivation, but motivation is unpredictable. Sometimes motivation appears, sometimes motivation disappears. If progress depends only on motivation, progress becomes unstable. So I started thinking differently. What if improvement does not require strong motivation? What if improvement can exist even when motivation is low? What if progress can continue even on difficult days? Because difficult days are part of real life. No one feels motivated every day. No one feels energetic every day. No one feels confident every day. Real growth must work even on ordinary days, even on slow days, even on imperfect days, because perfection is unrealistic, but progress is. Realistic, I realized that the biggest mistake was believing that change must feel dramatic, but maybe real change feels quiet. Maybe real change feels gradual. Maybe real change feels almost invisible in the beginning. And that idea led to the experiment. Instead of forcing massive transformation, I decided to test small, consistent improvement, 1% every day. Small enough to feel easy, small enough to repeat daily, because repeating small improvement daily might create something powerful, something stable, something real, and that possibility was worth testing. Once I understood that big change was difficult to maintain, I decided to simplify everything. I created one simple rule. Every day I had to improve something by just 1%. That was the entire experiment. No complicated system, no overwhelming checklist, no extreme pressure, just one small improvement every day. The improvement could be mental, physical, emotional, or practical. It did not need to be perfect. It only needed to move life slightly forward. The purpose was not speed. The purpose was direction, because direction matters more than speed. Moving slowly in the right direction is better than moving fast in the wrong direction. Before starting the experiment, I asked myself an important question. What does 1% improvement actually look like in real life? 1% improvement is almost invisible. It is a small action that feels easy to repeat. For example, reading 2 pages. Instead of 0, writing 1. Idea. Instead of none, reducing social media time by 10 minutes. Drinking 1 extra glass of water. Organizing 1 small part of the workspace. Planning tomorrow before sleeping. Waking up 10 minutes earlier. Stretching body for 2 minutes. Listening to something educational for 5 minutes. These actions are simple. They do not require strong motivation. They do not create stress. They do not feel overwhelming. And because they feel manageable, they feel repeatable. Repeatable actions create consistency. Consistency creates progress. On the first day of the experiment, I intentionally chose something very easy. I read 2 pages of a book, only 2 pages. Normally I would try reading 20 pages, but 20 pages feels like effort. 2 pages feels easy. The goal was not to impress anyone. The goal was to build continuity. On the second day, I made another small improvement. I reduced my social media usage by 10 minutes. 10 minutes is small, but it creates awareness. Awareness creates better decisions. On the third day, I prepared a simple plan for the next day, just a short list of important tasks, not a perfect schedule, just a clear direction. Clarity reduces hesitation. Hesitation wastes energy. Energy is important for consistency. On the fourth day, I improved my environment. I cleaned a small part of my workspace. A clean environment reduces distraction. Less distraction improves focus. Better focus improves quality of effort. Quality effort creates visible progress. One small improvement started influencing another improvement. Small changes started connecting together. Each action felt small, but the combination felt meaningful. I also decided to track my improvements. Tracking creates awareness. Awareness increases commitment. Each night I wrote down the small improvement I completed. This created a visual record of progress. The record showed evidence that improvement was happening, even when results were not dramatic. Seeing progress builds confidence. Confidence increases consistency. Consistency strengthens identity. I began noticing something interesting. Small improvements reduce internal resistance because the brain does not perceive small change as threat. The brain accepts gradual adjustment. Gradual adjustment becomes natural behavior. Instead of forcing discipline to grow slowly, quietly, stably. The experiment was not about perfection. Some days improvement felt very small. Some days improvement felt slightly bigger, but the rule remained the same. Never skip the daily improvement, even if the improvement feels tiny, because missing one day makes missing 2 days easier. And missing 2 days makes stopping easier. Consistency protects momentum. Momentum reduces effort. When progress becomes habit, effort feels lighter. Another important rule was flexibility. Improvement did not need to follow one category. Some days focused on productivity. Some days focused on physical health. Some days focused on learning. On the third day, I prepared a simple plan for the next day. Just a short list of important tasks, not a perfect schedule. Just a clear direction. Clarity reduces hesitation. Hesitation wastes energy. Energy is important for consistency. On the fourth day, I improved my environment. I cleaned a small part of my workspace. A clean environment reduces distraction. Less distraction improves focus. Better focus improves quality of effort. Quality effort creates visible progress. One small improvement started influencing another improvement. Small changes started connecting together. Each action felt small, but the combination felt meaningful. I also decided to track my improvements. Tracking creates awareness. Awareness increases commitment. Each night, I wrote down the small improvement I completed. This created a visual record of progress. The record showed evidence that improvement was happening, even when results were not dramatic. Seeing progress builds confidence. Confidence increases consistency. Consistency strengthens identity. I began noticing something interesting. Small improvements reduce internal resistance because the brain does not perceive small change as threat. The brain accepts gradual adjustment. Gradual adjustment becomes natural behavior. Instead of forcing discipline to grow, slowly, quietly, stably. The experiment was not about perfection. Some days improvement felt very small. Some days improvement felt slightly bigger, but the rule remained the same. Never skip the daily improvement, even if the improvement feels tiny, because missing one day makes missing 2 days easier, and missing 2 days makes stopping easier. Consistency protects momentum. Momentum reduces effort. When progress becomes habit, effort feels lighter. Another important rule was flexibility. Improvement did not need to follow one category. Some days focused on productivity. Some days focused on mental clarity. Some days focused on learning. During the first few days, the experiment felt simple. The effort felt manageable. The process felt under control. But after the initial excitement started to fade, the real challenge appeared. Consistency sounds simple, but repeating even small actions every day requires awareness. Some days I felt motivated. On those days, improving 1% felt easy, but not every day feels productive. There were days when I felt tired, days when I felt distracted, days when I did not feel like improving anything, even though the improvement required very little effort. The mind still looked for excuses. The brain prefers comfort. Comfort prefers familiar routines. Familiar routines often include delay. I noticed that resistance does not always appear as strong opposition. Sometimes resistance appears as small thoughts. Maybe I will do it later. Maybe one day break will not matter. Maybe today is not the right day. These thoughts feel harmless, but repeated delay weakens momentum. Momentum is fragile in the beginning. Small breaks make stopping easier. Stopping makes restarting harder. One evening I almost skipped the daily improvement. It was a busy day. Energy was low. Focus was limited. Improving even 1% felt unnecessary. But I reminded myself of the purpose of the experiment. The goal was not big progress. The goal was daily continuity. So instead of choosing something difficult, I chose something extremely small. I wrote one sentence in my notebook, just one sentence, that counted as improvement, that protected consistency, that preserved momentum. I began to understand something important. Difficulty is not always about effort. Difficulty is often about decision. Deciding to continue requires awareness. Awareness strengthens discipline. Discipline supports identity change. Some days the improvement felt almost invisible, but invisible progress is still progress. Even when results cannot be seen immediately, progress is still shaping behavior. Behavior is shaping identity. Identity influences future decisions. The struggle was not dramatic. It was quiet. Internal psychological, and that is why it was powerful. Because real growth often happens silently, without external recognition, without immediate reward. But each small action confirmed one belief: change is possible. Even when progress feels slow, even when improvement feels small, consistency was becoming easier because repetition was reducing resistance. And that was the first sign that the experiment was working. Around the second week, something started to change. The small actions were no longer feeling forced. They started feeling natural. At the beginning, every improvement required conscious effort. I had to remind myself to take action. I had to push myself slightly. But after repeating small improvements daily, the process began to feel automatic. The brain started expecting progress. Instead of asking whether I should improve something, I started asking what small improvement I will choose today. That shift was important because the question changed. And when the question changes, behavior changes. The improvements were still small, but their combined effect was becoming noticeable. Reading a few pages daily increased focus. Better focus made work easier. Planning the next day reduced confusion. Reduced confusion saved mental energy. Saving mental energy increased consistency. Consistency increased confidence. Confidence made improvement feel realistic. Progress was no longer dependent on strong motivation. Routine reduces decision fatigue. When decisions become easier, action becomes faster. One small improvement started supporting another improvement. Small wins were building momentum. Momentum was reducing resistance. Resistance was being replaced by curiosity. Instead of feeling pressure, changed life quickly, I felt interested in discovering how much change small actions can create. The experiment stopped feeling like effort. It started feeling like identity. I began to see myself as someone who improves regularly, even if the improvement is small. That identity shift was powerful because identity influences long-term behavior. When improvement becomes part of identity, consistency becomes stable. And stable consistency creates visible transformation. The turning point was not dramatic. There was no single big moment. There was gradual clarity, gradual control, gradual confidence, small. Improvements were quietly changing direction. And direction influences destination. That was the moment I realized 1% improvement is not small. Repeated 1% improvement becomes powerful after 30 days. There was no sudden overnight success. There was no extreme life transformation, but something more important had changed. My daily behavior had improved, and behavior influences long-term outcomes. The first noticeable change was clarity. I started each day with more direction. Small planning habits reduced confusion. Reduced confusion saved time. Saving time increased productivity. Productivity created a sense of progress. Progress increased motivation naturally. Focus also improved. Reading small amounts daily trained my attention. Instead of constantly switching between distractions, my mind became more comfortable staying engaged with one task. Longer, focused periods made work feel easier. Tasks that once felt difficult started feeling manageable. Another change was reduced hesitation. Previously, I often delayed starting important tasks because large tasks feel intimidating. But after practicing small improvements daily, starting felt easier because action became familiar. Familiar action reduces mental resistance even. Confidence improved not because of external validation, but because daily improvement provided internal proof. Each completed improvement confirmed one simple belief: progress is possible. This belief influences persistence. Persistence produces results. Results strengthen belief again. This cycle creates self-reinforcing growth. I also noticed improved awareness. Small daily reflection increased understanding of habits. Understanding habits improves decision-making. Better decisions improve daily outcomes. The improvements were not extreme individually, but together they created stability. Stability creates reliability. Reliability builds trust in self. Trust in self increases willingness to take action. The biggest result was not visible to others. The biggest result was internal. I felt more in control of my direction, more confident in my ability to improve, more patient with the process of growth. Because real progress rarely happens instantly. Real progress happens gradually. 30 days of small improvement did not create perfection, but it created momentum. And momentum is more valuable than temporary motivation, because momentum continues even when motivation disappears. That was the real result of the experiment. Not instant success, but reliable progress. And reliable progress creates long-term transformation. After completing the 30-day experiment, one idea became very clear. Small progress is powerful because it is sustainable. Most people fail not because they lack ability, but because they choose methods that are difficult to maintain. Extreme motivation creates extreme expectations. Extreme expectations create pressure. Pressure creates resistance. Resistance breaks consistency. Without consistency, progress disappears. Small improvement works differently. Small improvement reduces pressure. Reduced pressure reduces resistance. Reduced resistance increases repetition. Repetition builds habit. Habit reduces effort. When effort feels manageable, consistency becomes natural. Consistency is the foundation of growth. Another important insight is psychological safety. The brain prefers actions that feel achievable. When a task feels too difficult, the brain avoids it. Avoidance delays progress. Delay weakens confidence. But when improvement feels small, the brain accepts the task. Acceptance allows action. Action produces evidence. Evidence builds belief. Belief strengthens identity. Identity influences future behavior. That is why small improvement becomes powerful over time. Each small action sends a message to the brain. Improvement is possible. Progress is happening. Change is realistic. These messages slowly reshape self-perception. Instead of seeing growth as something difficult, growth becomes something normal. Another reason small improvement works is compound effect. One small action may not create visible difference, but repeated small actions create accumulated impact. Improvement builds upon previous improvement. Better focus supports better decisions. Better decisions support better habits. Better habits support better results. The process becomes connected. Progress becomes structured. Structure creates stability. Stable systems produce predictable growth. Motivation becomes less important because system supports action automatically. When improvement becomes daily standard, skipping improvement feels unusual. That is when behavior begins to change permanently. Small improvement is not. Exciting in the beginning, but it becomes powerful through repetition, because repetition creates identity shift. Identity shift creates long-term transformation. The lesson is simple. Big change often begins with small action, and small action becomes powerful when repeated consistently. After 30 days, I realized something important. We often wait for the perfect moment to change. We wait for strong motivation. We wait for the right opportunity. We wait for ideal conditions. But progress does not require perfect conditions. Progress only requires consistent direction. Many people believe success comes from one big decision. But often success comes from many small decisions repeated daily. Small improvements may feel slow, but slow progress is still progress. And progress always moves life forward. The problem is not starting. Most people start. The real challenge is continuing. Continuing when results are not visible yet. Continuing when improvement feels small, because small improvements rarely feel dramatic, but they quietly change direction. Direction shapes future outcomes. Imagine improving just 1% every day. After 1 week, progress becomes noticeable. After 1 month, change becomes measurable. After 1 year, transformation becomes visible. The difference between staying the same and improving often depends on small daily decisions. Small decisions repeated consistently create meaningful change. If 1% improvement feels insignificant, remember that 0% improvement keeps everything the same. Small progress is always stronger than no progress. You do not need to change everything today. You do not need to become perfect immediately. You only need to become slightly better than yesterday. That is enough, because improvement compounds over time. Consistency strengthens identity. Identity influences long-term success. Ask yourself one simple question. What small improvement can I make today, not tomorrow, not next week? Today, because today is where change begins. Small action, clear direction, consistent repetition. That is how real progress happens, 1% at a time.